Please, just one last wish, the homeless man whispered from the cold pavement. The female police officer froze. She had spent years arresting thieves, chasing criminals, enforcing the law, but she had never faced a request like this. No one expected what he asked next. And when she agreed, it shocked everyone who heard the story. Stay with me until the end, because what happened will leave you speechless. Before we begin, don't forget to like this video, hit subscribe, and comment where you're watching from. Now, let's begin. Officer Sarah Chen had been walking the downtown beat for 8 years. She knew every corner, every alley, every doorway where the homeless gathered when the temperature dropped. December in Chicago was brutal, and tonight the wind cut through the streets like broken glass. Sarah pulled her jacket tighter as she made her rounds, her breath forming small clouds in the freezing air. At 29 years old, Sarah had earned respect among her fellow officers for being fair but firm. She never looked down on people, regardless of their circumstances. While other officers might hurry past the homeless camps, Sarah always stopped to check on people. She carried granola bars in her patrol car and knew the names of the regulars who lived on the streets in her district. But tonight felt different. As Sarah turned onto 5th Street, she noticed something unusual. A small crowd had gathered around someone lying on the sidewalk near the old theater. She quickened her pace, her hand instinctively moving to her radio. When she reached the scene, Sarah saw an elderly man lying on a piece of cardboard, covered by a thin blanket that had seen better days. His weathered face was pale, and his breathing was shallow. The other homeless individuals who had gathered around him stepped back respectfully as Sarah approached. The man's name was William Torres, though everyone on the street called him Willie. Sarah had known him for 3 years. Willie was different from most of the homeless population in her district. He was educated, articulate, and always polite. He had been a teacher once, before a series of tragic events led him to the streets. Sarah had tried many times to connect him with social services, but Willie always politely declined, saying he was fine where he was now. Looking at Willie's frail condition, Sarah knew he was far from fine. His lips had a blue tint, and she could see that his body was shutting down. She knelt beside him, her voice gentle but urgent. "Willie, it's Officer Chen. Can you hear me? I'm going to call an ambulance." Willie's eyes opened slowly, and he looked directly at her. His voice was barely audible above the wind. "Sarah, no ambulance. Please, I need to tell you something. Something important." Sarah felt her chest tighten. She had seen this look before, in her father's eyes just before he passed away. "Willie, you need medical attention. Let me help you." Willie shook his head weakly. "I don't have much time left. I can feel it. But before I go, there's something I need you to do for me. One last wish." The other homeless individuals had moved closer, forming a protective circle around Willie and Sarah. They knew this was Willie's final moment, and they wanted to witness whatever was about to happen. Sarah found herself leaning closer, despite every protocol telling her to call for medical assistance immediately. "What is it, Willie? What do you need?" Willie reached into his coat with trembling hands and pulled out a small, worn envelope. The paper was yellowed with age, and Sarah could see careful handwriting on the front. He pressed the envelope into her hands, his fingers cold against her skin. "This letter," Willie whispered, his voice growing weaker. "It's for my daughter. I haven't seen her in 15 years. Haven't spoken to her since the day I lost everything." Sarah stared at the envelope, feeling its weight despite how light it was. The address was written in faded blue ink, somewhere across town in one of the nicer neighborhoods. "Willie, I can mail this for you. That's no problem at all." "No," Willie said, his grip tightening slightly on her wrist. "You don't understand. I need you to deliver it in person. I need you to tell her something that I couldn't put in the letter. Something she needs to hear." Sarah felt confused and concerned. "Willie, what happened between you two? Why can't you just call her?" Willie's eyes filled with tears, and for the first time in the 3 years Sarah had known him, she saw him completely vulnerable. I made terrible mistakes, Sarah. When my wife died, when I lost my job, when the bills kept coming and I couldn't handle the pressure, I started drinking. I said things to my daughter that I can never take back. Horrible things. I blamed her for wanting things we couldn't afford. I blamed her for her mother's medical bills. Sarah listened, her heart breaking for this man who had carried such guilt for so many years. The night I left, Willie continued, his voice barely a whisper now, I told her she was the reason our family fell apart. She was only 16 years old. 16, Sarah. And I made her believe lives was her fault, that everything bad in our... The wind picked up, and Sarah pulled her jacket around Willie, trying to keep him warm. The other homeless individuals stood silently, bearing witness to this moment of confession. What do you want me to tell her? Sarah asked softly. Willie looked up at the dark sky, as if searching for the right words. I want you to tell her that none of it was her fault, that she was the best thing that ever happened to me and her mother, that every day for the past 15 years, I've thought about her smile, her laugh, the way she used to help me grade papers when she was little. He paused, struggling to breathe. I want you to tell her that I never stopped loving her, even when I was too proud and too broken to reach out. And I want you to tell her that she should live her life without the weight of my failures on her shoulders. Sarah felt tears forming in her eyes. This wasn't just about delivering a letter. This was about healing a wound that had been festering for 15 years. Willie, why me? Why not a social worker or a chaplain? Because, Willie said with surprising clarity, in 3 years of knowing you, you've never once looked at me like I was less than human. You've always treated me with dignity, even when I was at my lowest. If anyone can help my daughter understand that her father wasn't always the monster he became, it's you. The weight of Willie's request settled on Sarah's shoulders. She thought about her own relationship with her father, about the things left unsaid, about second chances and forgiveness. She looked at the envelope in her hands, then back at Willie's hopeful face. I'll do it, she said quietly. I promise you, I'll deliver your message. Willie smiled for the first time that evening, and some of the pain seemed to leave his eyes. Thank you, Sarah. You don't know what this means to me. As Sarah sat there holding the letter, she realized that this moment was about to change her life in ways she couldn't imagine. What started as a routine patrol was becoming something much deeper, something that would test her understanding of duty, compassion, and the power of human connection. Willie's breathing became more labored, but his eyes remained fixed on Sarah's face. There's more, he whispered, his voice growing fainter. The letter explains everything, but there's something else, something I discovered about her just 2 weeks ago. Sarah leaned closer, straining to hear his words over the wind that seemed to be getting stronger by the minute. I've been watching her from a distance, Willie continued. Not stalking, just trying to see if she was okay. She works at the children's hospital downtown. She's a pediatric nurse. Every day she takes care of sick children, gives them hope when their parents are scared. A smile crossed Willie's weathered face despite his pain. She became everything I hoped she would be, Sarah. Everything her mother dreamed she could become. But she's carrying something heavy. I can see it in the way she walks, the sadness in her eyes even when she's helping others. What kind of sadness? Sarah asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. The sadness of thinking she wasn't worth fighting for. The sadness of believing her father abandoned her because she wasn't good enough. Willie's tears were flowing freely now. I did that to her, Sarah. I planted that poison in her heart when she was just a child, and it's still growing there. Sarah felt her own eyes burning. She thought about all the homeless individuals she'd encountered over the years, all the stories of broken families and lost connections. But Willie's situation felt different. There was still time to fix this, still a chance for healing. Willie, she's going to want to see you. When I deliver this letter, she's going to want to come find you. Willie shook his head weakly. I'll be gone soon, Sarah. This cold, my heart. Everything is shutting down, but that's okay. I made my peace with dying alone a long time ago. What I couldn't make peace with was dying knowing she still blamed herself for our family falling apart. The other homeless individuals began to move closer as Willie's voice became barely audible. They knew their friend was fading, and they wanted to be near him in his final moments. "There's something else in that envelope," Willie whispered. "Something that will prove to her that I never stopped caring, never stopped hoping we'd find our way back to each other someday." "What is it?" Sarah asked, her curiosity mixing with her growing sense of urgency. "Every birthday card I never sent. Every Christmas card I wrote but couldn't mail. Every Mother's Day when I thought about calling her to remember her mom together. They're all there, dated, showing her that not a day went by when I didn't think about her." Sarah's throat tightened. This wasn't just a letter she was being asked to deliver. This was 15 years of love that had been trapped inside a broken man's heart. "And there's money," Willie continued. "Not much, but everything I've managed to save over the years. I never spent it because I kept hoping someday I'd be able to give it to her. Maybe help her with something she needed." "Willie, how did you save money living on the streets?" Willie managed a weak laugh. "You'd be surprised how little you need when you've lost everything that matters. I collected cans, did odd jobs when I could. Sometimes people gave me more than I asked for. Every penny went into that envelope. It's not thousands, but it's something. It's proof that she was always my priority, even when I couldn't be the father she deserved." Sarah looked around at the faces of the other homeless individuals. They were nodding, some wiping their own tears. Clearly, they had known about Willie's dedication to his daughter, had watched him scrimp and save for a reunion he never believed would happen. One of the men stepped forward, an older African-American gentleman Sarah recognized as Marcus. "Officer Chen," he said quietly. "Willie's been talking about this letter for months. Every night when we'd gather around whatever fire we could build, he'd work on it by the light of his phone until the battery died. Sometimes he'd read parts of it to us, asking if we thought it sounded right." Another woman, Linda, who Sarah knew had been on the streets for over a decade, nodded in agreement. He practiced what he wanted to say to her over and over. "We all told him he should just go to the hospital where she works, but he was too ashamed, too afraid she'd call security or turn him away." Sarah felt the full weight of Willie's request settling on her. This wasn't just about delivering a message. This was about healing a wound that had infected 2 lives for 15 years. This was about giving a daughter back her father's love, even if it came after his death. Willie's grip on her wrist was getting weaker, but his eyes remained focused on her face. "Promise me something else, Sarah. When you see her, when you tell her about me, don't make me sound like a hero. I'm not. I was a coward who ran away when his family needed him most. But tell her that leaving her was the worst mistake I ever made, and that I spent every day since then wishing I could take it back. I promise, Willie. I'll tell her exactly what you want her to know." Willie smiled one last time, his breathing becoming even more shallow. "Thank you, Sarah. Thank you for giving an old fool a chance to say goodbye the right way." As Sarah sat there in the cold, holding Willie's letter and watching this man prepare to leave the world, she realized that she wasn't just witnessing someone's final moments. She was being entrusted with the most important mission of her career. Not catching criminals or enforcing laws, but delivering love that had been lost for too many years. The wind died down slightly, and in that moment of relative quiet, Sarah heard Willie whisper something that would stay with her forever. "Tell her I'm proud of her. Tell her I'm proud of the woman she became, despite having a father who failed her when she needed him most." Those were Willie's last coherent words. He closed his eyes and seemed to drift into a peaceful sleep, still holding Sarah's hand. The other homeless individuals began to gather closer, creating a circle of human warmth around their dying friend. Sarah knew she had to call for medical assistance, had to follow protocol, but she also knew that Willie had given her something precious in his final moments, a chance to heal a broken heart, to deliver love that had been waiting 15 years to find its way home. As she reached for her radio, Sarah looked down at the envelope in her hands. Tomorrow, she would have to find the courage to knock on a stranger's door and deliver news that would change a woman's understanding of her entire life. Tomorrow, she would have to become more than just a police officer. She would have to become a messenger of love, forgiveness, and second chances that come too late, but still matter more than anything in the world. Willie took his final breath at 11:47 that night, his hand still clasped in Sarah's. The paramedics arrived 10 minutes later, but there was nothing they could do. As they covered Willie's body and prepared to take him away, Sarah stood in the cold, holding the envelope that contained 15 years of unspoken love. Marcus, the older homeless man who had known Willie best, placed a gentle hand on Sarah's shoulder. "He's at peace now, officer. He's been carrying that letter around for 8 months, waiting for the right person to help him. He always said it had to be someone who would understand." Sarah looked around at the faces of the other homeless individuals who had witnessed Willie's final moments. These people had become Willie's family on the streets, had listened to him practice his words, had encouraged him when he lost hope. They knew better than anyone what this letter meant. Linda stepped forward, her voice soft but determined. "Officer Chen, there's something else you should know about Willie. He wasn't just any teacher before he ended up out here. He taught at Roosevelt Elementary for 23 years. Half the kids in this neighborhood learned to read because of him." Sarah felt her throat tighten. What happened to him? How did someone like that end up homeless? Marcus shook his head sadly. His wife got cancer. The medical bills destroyed them. Willie took out loans, mortgaged their house, sold everything they owned trying to save her. When she died anyway, he couldn't handle the guilt and the debt. Started drinking to numb the pain. Lost his job, lost his house, lost his daughter's respect. But he never lost his love for her, Linda added. Every person who lived on these streets knew about Emma. Willie would talk about her constantly. How proud he was of her grades, how she used to help him set up his classroom, how she wanted to be a nurse just like the ones who took care of her mother. Sarah realized that Willie's story was more complex than she had understood. This wasn't just about a father who had abandoned his family. This was about a man who had been crushed by circumstances beyond his control and had made terrible choices in his pain. The next morning, Sarah found herself staring at Willie's envelope across her kitchen table. She had barely slept, thinking about the promise she had made to a dying man. The address on the envelope led to Maple Street, a quiet residential neighborhood about 20 minutes from downtown. Sarah had looked up Emma Torres online and found that Willie had been right about her career. She was indeed a pediatric nurse at Children's Memorial Hospital. Her social media profiles showed a woman with Willie's gentle eyes and a smile that didn't quite reach them. In every photo, even the ones where she was laughing with friends, Sarah could see the sadness Willie had noticed. Before heading to Emma's house, Sarah decided to visit Children's Memorial Hospital. She wanted to see Emma in her work environment, to understand who she had become before delivering news that would shatter her world. Sarah arrived at the hospital during the afternoon shift change. She asked to speak with someone in pediatric nursing, explaining that she was following up on a community matter. The charge nurse, a woman named Patricia, agreed to speak with her briefly. "Emma Torres is one of our best nurses," Patricia said when Sarah mentioned the name. "She's been here for 6 years, and I've never seen anyone connect with sick children the way she does. The kids absolutely adore her. She stays late, comes in on her days off, always volunteers for the hardest cases." "What do you mean by the hardest cases?" Sarah asked. "The children who don't have family support. The ones whose parents can't be here because of work or other circumstances. Emma seems drawn to the kids who are facing their illness alone. She makes sure they never feel abandoned." Sarah felt her heart breaking as she began to understand how Willie's abandonment had shaped his daughter's entire life. Emma had dedicated herself to making sure other children never felt the loneliness she had experienced. Patricia continued, "There's something about Emma, though. She gives everything to these kids and their families, but she keeps everyone at arm's length in her personal life. She's never mentioned her own family, never talks about her childhood. It's like she's built walls around her past. That evening, Sarah drove to Maple Street. Emma's house was a small but well-maintained bungalow with a garden full of flowers even in the December cold. Through the front window, Sarah could see warm light and bookshelves lining the walls. It looked like the home of someone who had worked hard to build a peaceful life. Sarah sat in her patrol car for 10 minutes, gathering courage. How do you tell someone that the father who abandoned them had just died on the street, thinking about them until his final breath? How do you deliver 15 years of love that had been trapped in silence? Finally, Sarah walked up the front steps and knocked on the door. When it opened, she found herself looking at a woman who was unmistakably Willie's daughter. Emma had his kind eyes, his gentle demeanor, and the same careful way of speaking that Sarah remembered from their conversations over the years. "Emma Torres?" Sarah asked, showing her badge. "I'm Officer Sarah Chen with the Chicago Police Department. I wonder if I could speak with you for a few minutes." Emma's face immediately showed concern. "Is everything all right? Did something happen in the neighborhood?" "It's not about the neighborhood," Sarah said carefully. "It's about your father, William Torres." Emma's expression changed instantly. She stepped back from the door, her hand gripping the frame for support. "My father? I haven't spoken to my father in 15 years. What's this about?" Sarah took a deep breath. "May I come in? This is something we should discuss privately." Emma hesitated, then stepped aside to let Sarah enter. The inside of the house was exactly what Sarah had expected. Books everywhere, comfortable furniture, photographs of Emma with children from the hospital, but no family photos anywhere to be seen. They sat in Emma's living room, and Sarah began the most difficult conversation of her career. "Emma, I'm sorry to have to tell you this, but your father passed away last night." Emma's face went through a series of emotions: shock, pain, anger, and something that might have been relief. She was quiet for a long moment before speaking. "Where? How?" "He was homeless, Emma. He'd been living on the streets for several years. He died from exposure and heart failure." Emma closed her eyes, and Sarah could see her struggling to process this information. "My father was homeless? For how long?" Sarah wasn't sure how much to reveal immediately. "Several years. But Emma, before he died, he asked me to give you something. He had a message for you." Emma's voice was barely audible. "What kind of message?" Sarah pulled out Willie's envelope and placed it on the coffee table between them. "He wrote you a letter, but he also asked me to tell you some things in person, things he couldn't put into words on paper." Emma stared at the envelope like it might explode. "I don't know if I want to hear this, officer. My father made his choice 15 years ago when he walked out of our house and never looked back." "Emma," Sarah said gently, "I think there's more to the story than you know. Your father never stopped thinking about you, never stopped loving you. He spent his final years carrying guilt about the way he left, about the things he said to you when he was drinking and in pain." Emma's eyes filled with tears. "He told you about that night? He told me that he blamed you for things that were never your fault, that he said horrible things to a 16-year-old girl who was grieving her mother and watching her family fall apart. He spent every day since then wishing he could take those words back." Emma stood up abruptly and walked to the window, her back to Sarah. "Do you know what it's like to grow up believing your father left because you weren't worth staying for? To think that somehow you were responsible for destroying your family? That's exactly what your father was afraid of," Sarah said softly. "That's why he asked me to come here. He wanted you to know that none of it was your fault, that leaving you was the worst mistake he ever made." Emma turned around, tears streaming down her face. "Then why didn't he come back? Why didn't he try to make things right?" "Because he was ashamed. Because he thought you were better off without him. Because he watched you from a distance and saw that you had become an amazing person despite what he put you through." "You're saying he knew about my job? About my life?" "He was incredibly proud of you, Emma. He knew you worked at Children's Memorial. He knew you dedicated your life to helping sick children. He said you became everything he and your mother had dreamed you could be." Emma sank back into her chair, overwhelmed by this revelation. "He was watching me?" Not in a creepy way, Sarah assured her. He just needed to know you were okay. And when he saw how you turned your pain into compassion for others, how you made sure sick children never felt abandoned the way you did, he knew he had raised a daughter with an incredible heart. Emma picked up the envelope with trembling hands. What's in here? Everything he never got to say to you. Birthday cards he wrote but never sent. Christmas wishes. Letters about how proud he was of your achievements. And Emma, there's something else. He saved money for you, every penny he could manage while living on the streets. It's not a fortune, but it represents 15 years of putting you first, even when he had nothing. Emma opened the envelope carefully, and dozens of cards and letters spilled out onto the coffee table. Each one was dated, showing years of consistent love and regret. There was also a bank envelope containing several $100s in small bills, money that had clearly been saved coin by coin. As Emma read through the letters, Sarah watched her face transform. The anger and hurt were still there, but something else was emerging. Understanding, maybe, or the beginning of forgiveness. One letter made Emma gasp. It was dated just 2 months earlier. In it, Willie had written about seeing her at the hospital, about watching her comfort a crying child in the parking lot, about realizing that his daughter had become the kind of person who healed others instead of hurting them. He saw me do that? Emma whispered. He saw you being the incredible person you are. And Emma, he wanted me to tell you something specific. He said he's proud of you, proud of the woman you became. Not because of him, but despite him. Emma was crying openly now, clutching the letters to her chest. All these years, I thought he just forgot about me. I thought I meant nothing to him. You meant everything to him. His last words were about you. He asked me to tell you that you should live your life without carrying the weight of his failures on your shoulders. They sat in silence for several minutes, while Emma processed everything Sarah had told her. Finally, Emma looked up with red-rimmed eyes. Officer Chen, can I ask you something? Why did he choose you to deliver this message? Why not a social worker or a chaplain? Sarah thought about Willie's words from the night before. He said that in the 3 years I knew him, I never treated him like he was less than human. He trusted me to help you understand that your father wasn't always the broken man he became at the end. Emma nodded slowly. What was he like? In recent years, I mean. He was gentle, educated, polite. He helped other homeless people write letters to their families. He never caused trouble. And Emma, he talked about you constantly. Everyone on the streets knew about his daughter, the nurse who helped sick children. Emma smiled through her tears. That sounds like the father I remember from before Mom got sick, before everything fell apart. That's who he always was inside, Sarah said. The drinking, the anger, the abandonment, that was his pain talking. But underneath all of that, he was still the man who taught elementary school for 23 years and raised a daughter who dedicates her life to healing others. Emma stood up and walked over to a bookshelf, pulling out a photo album Sarah hadn't noticed before. She opened it to reveal pictures of a younger Willie with his wife and daughter. Family vacations, birthday parties, school events. Willie looked happy and proud in every single photo. I put these away after he left, Emma said. I couldn't stand to look at them. But maybe it's time to remember that he wasn't always the man who hurt me. Maybe it's time to remember that he was also the man who taught me to read, who helped me with my science projects, who told me I could be anything I wanted to be. Sarah felt tears in her own eyes as she watched Emma reconnecting with memories she had buried for 15 years. Your father would be so grateful to know you're remembering the good times too. Emma sat back down, still holding the photo album. Officer Chen, I need to ask you something, and please be honest. Do you think he suffered? At the end, I mean. Sarah considered her answer carefully. He was cold and his body was failing, but Emma, I don't think he suffered emotionally. When I promised to deliver his message to you, when he knew his love would finally reach you, he smiled. He looked peaceful. His last conscious moments were spent thinking about how proud he was of you. Emma nodded, seeming to find some comfort in that. Thank you for being with him. Thank you for making sure he didn't die alone. He wasn't alone, Sarah realized. The other people on the streets, they were his family. They loved him and took care of him the best they could. Your father found community even in his darkest circumstances. As the evening grew later, Sarah prepared to leave. But Emma had one more question. Officer Chen, would it be possible for me to meet some of the people who knew my father? The ones who were with him at the end? Sarah smiled. I think they would love that. They have their own stories about Willie, about the kind of man he was on the streets. They can help you understand his final years in a way that might bring you peace. Emma walked Sarah to the door, clutching Willie's letters in her hands. Thank you for this. I know it couldn't have been easy to deliver this kind of news. It was an honor, Sarah said honestly. Your father trusted me with the most important thing in his life, his love for you, being able to fulfill his last wish, to help heal this wound between you. It's the most meaningful thing I've ever done as a police officer. As Sarah drove home that night, she thought about the power of forgiveness, about second chances that come too late but still matter, about love that survives even the worst mistakes. Willie Torres had died on a cold street, but his love had finally found its way home to the daughter who needed to hear it. 3 weeks later, Emma Torres stood in the downtown area where her father had spent his final years. She wasn't alone. Marcus, Linda, and several other members of Willie's street family had agreed to meet her there. They shared stories she had never heard, showed her the corner where Willie would sit and write his letters by streetlight, told her about the nights he would talk about his daughter, the nurse, until everyone around the fire knew her story by heart. Emma established a memorial fund in her father's name, providing services for homeless individuals struggling with addiction and family separation. But more than that, she carried Willie's message forward in her own life. She began reaching out to estranged family members of her young patients, understanding now that sometimes love exists even in the most broken circumstances. Officer Sarah Chen continued walking her beat, but something fundamental had changed in how she saw her role. She wasn't just enforcing laws anymore. She was connecting human hearts, one conversation at a time. Every homeless person she encountered now reminded her that behind every life on the streets was a story of loss, love, and the possibility of redemption. Willie Torres died believing he was a failure as a father, but his last wish proved that love doesn't die with us. Sometimes it just needs the right messenger to deliver it home. Sometimes the most important promise we can make isn't to the living, but to the dying. And sometimes, fulfilling one man's final request becomes the beginning of healing that spreads far beyond what we ever imagined possible. This story reminds us that we never know when we might be asked to carry someone's love across the distance of years, mistakes, and broken hearts. When that moment comes, we have the power to change lives forever.